It's been the consensus over the last 70 years that mental illness is not a moral problem. Mental health discourse has been consistently framed in a way that depicts the history of psychoanalysis as a moralizing form of therapy that makes biologically based mental health conditions into moral problems that people are to blame for. I'm not saying that this isn't at all true. What I'm saying is that when it comes to mental health and mental illness, we are dealing with two separate clinical entities. One is not a moral issue, and one is. Mental illness is not a moral issue. Mental health is. Dr. Karen Horney wrote, "It is true that the moral standards of many persons mean nothing more than keeping up with the appearance of morality. It would not be correct to say that the content of the need to appear perfect coincides only incidentally with the culturally approved moral values. The perfectionistic aims would not fulfill their various functions if they did not coincide with the approved standards. But they only ape the gestures of moral norms. They are, as it were, a counterfeiting of moral values. The pseudo-moral aims, far from being identical with moral norms and ideals, prevents the latter from developing. The type that we've been discussing has adopted his standards under the stress of fear for the sake of peace. He complies with them formalistically, but with inner opposition. For example, he is superficially friendly to people but feels this attitude, unconsciously, as a burdensome imposition. Only after his friendliness has lost its compulsory character can he start to consider perhaps whether he himself would like to be friends to others. There are indeed moral problems involved in the neurotic need for perfection, but they are not the ones with which the patient is apparently struggling, nor those which he pretends to have. The real moral issues lie in the insincerity, the haughtiness, and the refined cruelty which are inseparable from the structure which has been described. The patient is not responsible for these traits. He could not help their developing. But in analysis, he has to face them. Not because it is the analyst's business to improve his morals, but because he suffers from them. They interfere with a good relationship with others and with himself, and they prevent his best possible development. I've come to agree with Horney's view of mental health, that the best measure of psychological health is our ability to have quality relationships with ourselves and others, and that the truest goal for psychotherapy may be to improve these relationships. When dealing with mental illnesses, like generalized anxiety disorder, or major depressive disorder, or bipolar disorder, these are not moral issues. But when a woman in her late 60s with persistent depression is still holding grudges against her family for a joke that was made almost a decade ago, and she's unwilling to work on those relationships, when that person is prioritizing keeping the distance versus making amends and improving their relationship, then that is when mental health becomes a moral issue. She can choose to live however she wants to. She can choose to never speak to her family again. If that is her wish, she can die unsatisfied, isolated, and resentful. But I would prefer that she not do that. It is not my job to change her, or force her to make decisions based on what I think is right. But it is my job to try to help her improve the quality of her relationship with herself. Just some thoughts. Thank you for stopping by. Until next time.